Welcome to the BankTalk podcast, the show where we talk to leaders and experts from the community banking sector. Whether you are a current CEO or aspire to be one, this podcast will give you valuable insights and advice on how to run your financial institution better. Each episode explores a new topic with a guest who brings their unique experience and knowledge. Tune in and discover something new each time you listen.
Hello, welcome to BankTalk. My name is Rich Carty, Sales Executive with Remedy Consulting. On today's show, we are going to be talking with Brennan Summers, VP of Corporate Development over at Stukin, which are providing cutting-edge internships and courseware to help educators help students around the world. So with that being said, we'll get kicked off. Looking forward to a good conversation and learning a little bit more. Brennan, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you. I know we crossed paths at an event earlier this year, and you're quite a busy guy kind of covering the country and so forth, getting Stukin's message out there and really help that message get across. Can you tell us a little bit of a background about maybe what your role is and Stukin is doing and how it really works?
Yeah, absolutely. So Stukin, which you got right, it's spelled Stukent, and most people, since we're based out of Idaho, have just assumed that we've misspelled the word student. But in all accuracy, Stukin started 10 years ago, so we're a decade old, and it sprung out of this idea of we had students in higher ed courses that were finding that what they were learning in the classroom wasn't matching what they were doing in the real world when it came to actually the job market. And we had professors telling us that they were craving more up-to-date, accurate, and engaging curriculum. And this matters. This matters because everyone's, when they're going through post-secondary, their hope is that they're being prepared for the workforce. So what we did is it started with digital marketing. Digital marketing curriculum 10 years ago is talking about radios and TV ads, and there wasn't textbooks out there that were talking about how you place ads online. So our founder built a simulation meaning that these students in the classroom could practice what they would be doing in the real world. That started with one product, and now it's sprung into dozens, and we're in universities throughout the world. We're in every state in the nation, and in high schools, we're having a ball doing these simulations. But it's all experiential learning. It's all these simulated internships or simternships. And it's changing the way that education is operating. We think education in terms of I'm highlighting my dusty old textbook so I can pass a test. With AI coming on board, it's becoming more important to know how to do something than to just know something.
That makes sense. Pretty creative. And when did you guys get started?
Yeah, so we've been about 11 years ago, over 10 years ago, we've been rocking and rolling. We started out of small town Idaho, of all places, and Yellowstone Park is in our backyard. And we've actually stayed here. So we have executives throughout the country and a sales force throughout the country, but we've stayed headquartered in small town Idaho.
That's awesome. Yeah. And like I mentioned, meeting you at an event, you guys had won an award at the event we were at, obviously. So things seem to be going well. And like you said, you're nationwide at this point, but when you look at maybe the states or, the demographics, who is this really benefiting the most? And what areas are best suited for this?
Yeah, so you can think of our company in these two verticals of a higher ed market and a high school market. In higher ed, we're operating largely in business and marketing schools in the Harvards and the Oxfords of the world, as well as the smallest little community colleges you think of. In high schools, we're operating in the CTE or career technical education space. These high schools, it's a really exciting time right now because we are offering courseware curriculum, what you would think of as like a dusty old textbook, but it's all online and updated regularly. We offer these simulations. So a kid in high school can now say, look, I might be interested in being an accountant. So they are in an accounting class and they get to actually do what an accountant does. So they log in and they're working for a fictitious company. They got a boss emailing them and they got to run the books of this company. And they've got problems that arise and they got to prepare financial statements and they got to answer to a board. And they're doing what they would do in the real world. The value of that for a high school kid is there's a lot of people that go to post-secondary who think they want to do something, and then they get there and they get a taste for it and they realize, whoa, 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 I don't have a desire or an aptitude for this. And they've wasted a lot of time and money. What if we could find out earlier in a student's journey what they have an aptitude and a desire for? And we're doing that in the space of a simulation. You do a simulation in digital marketing, you do a simulation in entrepreneurship. Every kid might want to be an entrepreneur, but when they get the vibe for it, they may say, oh, this isn't for me. Or better yet, they say, this is exactly what I've been looking for, Rich. After they do this simulation, we also have certifications. Certifications are huge right now, especially in CTE. Student can take a certification exam, and now whether or not they go to college, they have something they can put on a resume. They have something they can talk about. It's something that schools are proud to give out and have, just kind of some collateral that students are leaving high school with.
That's great. And that makes a lot of sense. I know myself, I have a close friend that is the exact example you gave. He went to school, he went to graduate school, became an accountant, worked for a big firm. And after a few busy seasons in the tax world, he just said, this isn't for me. This isn't my personality. And so, he was there for 5-10 years. And then he said, I want to go back. I want to go back and learn a little bit more about sales. And by the time he was 30, he said, I basically not wasted time, but I could have easily had a different career path. And that would probably have been better suited to have, like you said, a simulation to go through.
Yeah. So Rich, I'll put you on the spot here. Do you take a wild guess which major degree has the highest student loan attached to it?
Ooh, that's a great question. Knowing people, I'm going to go with, doctors, just thinking about what that might be, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, so that's a smart answer. Is med school's long and expensive. All these student loans that are owed, most of them belong to people that never finished. So that tells us they probably weren't ready to be there in the first place. They didn't know what they wanted to do.
Yeah.
So and that's a problem in our country as people debate whether or not to pay off student loans and what that means for the economy. Having a lot of people with student loans is just not beneficial, especially if they didn't leave with anything.
Right. No, that does make sense thinking about it with knowing people that, whether you change a major, let alone getting into a job and a career, I can see it being powerful. Now,
Yeah.
Two-pronged question. In terms of the simternship, maybe explain that and if that's any different of the simulation. And how long are these simulations lasting? Is it a semester they're kind of going through these programs? Is it a month or two? What does that look like?
Yeah, great question. So we'll use like a high school as an example here. So you're in a Boston high school and you're in let's talk personal finance. That's a really exciting one right now. The simulations, we call them simternships because they're in a simulated internship. So the student will log in and it will last the length of the course, but the teacher in high school or the professor in higher ed has the autonomy to kind of shift it. So how often do they want the student in the simulation? How long do they want it to run? But we've learned that repetition's the mother of memory. And for too long, a chapter in a textbook about something gets forgotten and it's not enough. So these students engaging and becoming immersed in this new simulated internship matters. So they log in and they'll have a whole trial run at adulting. So in the personal finance one, which I get really excited about, Rich, is they get paid on Monday. A check comes into their account. Isn't that exciting? And then on Friday, their bills are due. And each week, real-time week simulates a month of financial decisions. So you can imagine if you had an 18-week course and you got a year and a half of experience through that 18-week course, how far ahead you'd be. And these students are doing everything in this simulation that you and I have to do, but we have to do it like in the school of hard knocks, and they get to do it in a safe environment where they can make mistakes and learn from them. So they get paid and they got to pay taxes. They got to file taxes. They've got to buy health insurance and car insurance. And what's the difference between deductibles and premiums? And should I put it in a 401k or an IRA? And they're doing life and they're saving money and they're paying bills and they're investing in the stock market and they get to do all of this. They're going to save up and buy a house. And the whole time they're in this class, they've got a credit score, and that credit score is changing based on their financial decisions. And the teacher gets to inject more money into the simulation if they so choose, or they get to allow the students to have a life happens event where suddenly a student has twins and now all their monthly expenses have just tripled. And so this whole experience with financial literacy especially has really taken shape, and it's catching fire around the world. So the simulations are something that you can just imagine if you got on a Delta flight and your pilot got on and said, "Hey, everyone, this is my first time flying. I hope this goes well." We would all be pushing the button to get off the plane. Thankfully, pilots go through a simulation before they actually fly. Why? Because nobody wants them actually up in the air for their first go around. We use simulations in golf when it's snowing outside and we want to improve. So, the whole purpose of simulations is we want to prepare for when the time comes to actually perform. So the idea that we give every 18-year-old a credit card and say good luck without them actually having practice with any of it in a safe environment is wild. The same thing with the first time you bought a car. It was a real car with real credit. You didn't get a practice run at it. That's
Yeah.
why when it comes to learning how to swim, we put floaties on the kids and we keep them in the shallow end for a while. But when it comes to financial literacy and when it comes to these job markets, we just push people in the deep end and hope that they come to the top.
We'll be right back.
Is your technology spend getting a little out of hand? Are you worried about making those big strategic moves because of those hefty vendor contracts? Or maybe you just feel like your technology is currently holding you back. In today's banking world, overspending on technology is a risk you just can't take. Going up against those major vendors on your own can be tough, expensive, and especially when the contracts are designed to benefit them. That's where Remedy can come in. Remedy Consulting helps our clients stay competitive and grow their business with the right technology, products, and their spending strategies. Not a Remedy client yet? Head on over to remedyconsult.net for a free review of your tech stack, spending, and contract terms. Even if you're not the perfect fit, you'll walk away with expert advice and confidence in your technology decisions. Check us out at remedyconsult.net or give us a call at 262-955-7776. Thanks for tuning in, and now let's get back to the episode.
And I think those metaphors, I think, are great. And I look back to, high school and my education background. And, I was fortunate that there was classes you could pick from back then, but you had to opt in to use them, and I still think it's important to get the financial, 101 out there at an earlier age to get it. And on what you're saying, it's feeling it, through, like you said, there's no crystal ball out there that's going to say this might happen to you, whether you have the twins or you have a car and it all of a sudden starts running. Like, how are you going to come up with the extra cash and whatnot for that? So, no, I think those are both great. So let's switch gears. Obviously, we're on the Bank Talk podcast here, so let's talk more on the FI side of the house. So, how are you guys, infiltrating the FI community space, and what do those partnerships look like? And maybe talk a little bit about some successes or maybe some challenges.
Yeah, it's a great question. It's one of my large responsibilities at the company is overseeing our FI relationships and building out this vertical for financial literacy. So, every FI I speak to says, yeah, we love financial literacy and we want to support it. You say, great. They have a lot of reasons for that. Whether you're a bank or credit union, there's a lot of reasons that you want to support financial literacy. One of them, self-serving, is nobody wants customers or members who are struggling with their finances and that it's constant overdraft fees and, repos. There's a great incentive to having a customer member base that is financially literate and doing well. If your members and customers are doing well, that you can do well. So they want to grow that populace, but also it's just a right thing to do. If we're operating in this space, the right thing to do is to teach the next generation of borrowers and lenders and business owners how to manage their finances. The challenge comes to what are we doing about it? For too long, FIs will go into a high school for a day and hold a fair and they'll let the kids practice being things and they'll all applaud and say, look at what we did. Or they'll come in and they'll drop off their pens and their business cards and tell kids it's important to save money and they'll call it good. And that's just not enough. And we know it's not enough because for decades and decades, kids aren't getting more financially literate. We're having the same problems. So what we have done is we've built this incredible simulation For years, we've sold it directly to schools, and the schools go crazy for it, but there's always a funding challenge. In addition to the funding challenge for schools, is we want to allow these students to have a real experience with it. If they're in the simulation and they're playing with a generic fake FI, that's not as real for them. I want them to play with a local, real FI, somebody that they can see their billboard, somebody they can go in and open accounts with. So we partner with them. We allow FIs to come in, put their name on the simulation so students in the classroom can actually learn with their products. And we want to make it realistic. And then the beauty of it is the goal is we want bankable kids. We want them to go and open accounts. We want them to feel comfortable borrowing. We want them to know what credit is. So we've got some great partners who will sponsor significant number of schools in an effort to increase financial literacy in their community and also get some brand exposure for what they're doing in this space.
That's great. No, it's an awesome program. I would think, a lot of people would want to have within their community. I mean, you guys, obviously, again, 10, 11 years in, how would you quantify financial literacy for people that have gone through this program? Are they choosing a major before, they get into school, or, how do you guys track that? And then for the community, banks and credit unions, what are some takeaways, obviously, between getting their name out there in the community?
Great question. Specific when it comes to financial literacy, that is a hard thing to put success to, because how you define success in financial literacy is very different than how I define it in our daily lives. I know that I spend too much money going out to eat for lunch every day. I know that if I just pack that PB&J, that my finances look different. But I've made a choice that I enjoy going out to lunch in the social aspect, and I'm okay with that. I put the value on that. I'm all right with that. You, on the other hand, you may say, I need that morning cup of Joe at Starbucks, and I'm going to stop. Wait, you're on the East Coast, so it's probably Dunkin', right? So you're getting your Dunkin' in the morning. I don't do that. So that's okay. You're spending money where I'm not. In classrooms, especially, teachers feel really vulnerable. Our teachers aren't the most financially literate, and they're supposed to stand in front of a bunch of 15-year-olds and lecture them on what they're supposed to do. So knowing what constitutes success and not success is important. We define success when it comes to financial literacy as experience. If you've had experience doing something, of seeing mistakes and being able to correct them, we're going to call that success. So a student who has spent 10 weeks in a simulation that has simulated nearly a year of financial decisions, we can show that as quantifiable success. They now have nearly a year of financial decisions. If these conversations are not happening at the dinner table, which they're not, when else are these kids going to know that they could engage in the stock market, that they could get a high yield savings account versus just a regular savings account? There's so much out there that people just don't know. So number one, we consider experiential learning and exposure success amongst itself. Number two, there's something to be said about the fact that we can break poverty cycles with students who we know that poverty is hereditary. They watch the financial habits of those around them, and they think that's normal, or that's all that they've known. So you can see that doctors' kids often become doctors, and lawyers' kids also, education and poverty, too often it's connected because it's what they see and it's what they're exposed to. So we love when we have a kid that comes in and says, wow, I didn't know that I could use credit to my benefit. And then they go home and they talk to mom and dad about it. And so we have our FIs tell us, hey, we've got kids coming and bringing their parents to sit down and talk about refinancing. We got students coming in because of what they learned in the class with a simulation that we're sponsoring. And they're bringing in parents who are not banked and talking about what they can do to get their credit changed and things like that. So those are the success points we see. We can also see certifications, personal finance certification exams being taken, things that are, more academically quantifiable.
That makes sense. Yeah. And you touched upon something there that I was literally just reading an article a week or two ago about, because on a personal note, I have two young kids, and as much as you can tell your child, it seems they're going to mimic your actions and they're seeing what you're doing. So if I'm sitting on the couch on my phone rather than doing something, they're going to realize that more than a different type of actions. Probably similar in the finance side, however you're kind of banking and budgeting, those are the things they might see. I still remember rolling pennies and nickels with my father on Saturday mornings, and it's things like that might stand out to your kids.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, it's sad when we know that abusive homes too often produce abusive homes, but this is the opportunity where you can change your kids' lives by some financial literacy and stuff that you may not have had in your home. And if we can change that in the classroom and break some cycles of poverty and some bad habits, then what a great cause to be involved in.
And Brendan, you touched upon, parents getting involved. And I think that's just another opportunity for some of these financial institutions to capitalize on maybe new accounts, or maybe you have some stats on what that might look like. Are there certain states, or do you have any stats that would relate back to, successes?
Yeah, it's a great question. So Utah of all states is the number one state when it comes to financial literacy education. And we've worked with two FIs in that state who have come together and say, we're going to make sure that every high school in the state of Utah has access to this simulation. We think
Yeah.
this is the product. And so they've offered it to every high school. Now, that makes sense for the big Salt Lake City high schools or the Provo high schools, but there are some small rural high schools in the middle of nowhere, Utah, that they have access to this at no charge because the FIs have stepped up. So what that means is the parents come into back to school night, or they come into parent teacher conference, and these financial literacy teachers, they say, hey, this is what your students are going to learn in our class today. And they show them the simulation, and they show them the curriculum, they show them the certifications. And these teachers typically, they're really excited to be able to say, hey, this is different. These students are going to take a simulation at adulting. They're going to be buying cars and they're going to be investing in the stock market, and it's different. And what the parents usually say is, where was this when I was in school? And they immediately say, well, how do you have this? So the parents will send the students home with a homework. It says, review your finances with your parents. And they'll sit down, and the kids will say, all right, mom, dad, do I have too much on my credit card? Should I put more on my debit card? What do I do? And they start having these conversations. And the parents will say, where did this come from? And they click the logo of the FI, and immediately it takes them to a page of, let's talk about opening an account.
Wow.
And so we're seeing this across the country. We're hearing about kids who are on the verge of dropping out, who the parents have tried everything to get these kids to have an aptitude for school in general. And then they take this financial literacy class, and it's no longer death by PowerPoint. And we're finding these kids have a great aptitude for sales in the simulation, or the stocks are getting them excited. And we literally have examples of students who were on their way to drop out of high school, who are now excelling because they finally found something different that feeds them. I think it's when Einstein, talks about, if you judge a fish on his ability to fly, he'll spend his whole life thinking he's stupid. I butchered the quote, but that's what we're finding. If you can give these students in career technical education some experiential learning, and it's not just PowerPoint and test, now they're finding something that excites them and they're excelling at it.
Oh, and even just like you said, having that link where they can hit a button and it goes directly to that site. I mean, half the battles people just don't know where to turn to. So I'm sure just having that there, one touch, you're there, that's got to be really useful.
So, and I'll add, Rich, whenever you buy a red car, suddenly now you're like, wow, there's red cars everywhere. And there's, this very sense of psychology of the mind is so overwhelmed, especially now, that we have to look for certain things. So FIs often find themselves in saturated markets, and they scratch their head and they say, okay, well, how do I stand out? I'll tell you, the moment that a high school kid is using a specific FI's brand, logo, accounts, card, everything in a simulation, suddenly they're now seeing all of your billboards. They're now hearing your radio ads. They're seeing every branch that you've built. They're seeing your digital marketing. It's all over. So suddenly we've now amplified all of your marketing efforts, and you are now standing out. When it comes time for that young adult to open their first account, they're going to stick with you for car loans, student loans, that when they're running a very successful business, their mortgages, you've now won them over. And it started with something as simple as a financial literacy class.
Yeah. I think the other part of it is kids those age, or really, anybody, you talk to your inner circles, you talk to your friends. And I still remember, having one of my first jobs, and two kids around my same age, when I was 18, talked about IRAs. And I said, I had no idea what it was at that point. And they said, oh, you should open it. You talk, then they talk about compounding interest and why they're important. And lucky enough, I started putting a few bucks, and, I look back and I was lucky to, build a little nest egg then.
Yeah.
And to that point, you say, oh, who are you going through for that? And you end up going with the same one because they're doing it. So in terms of maybe some other markets or industries, I think an interesting one that I'm sure everyone's always kind of talked to you about, like you said to me in the past, but I know you work in prison, so maybe touch upon that and maybe some other successes in terms of different markets or areas.
Yeah, so our work in the incarceration space is incredibly rewarding, but it's also one that people have one of two reactions. They either say immediately, like, wow, that's incredible, or they say, what are we doing wasting our time and money with those people? And I
Yeah.
think it's a fair question. It's something we need to look at. So, what we have done is we go into these incarceration units, these prisons, these jails, and we deploy our financial literacy. We have FIs that are sponsoring it. And again, an FI, when it comes to marketing dollars, you really want to spend marketing dollars in a prison. We see an argument for it because the purpose of a prison is to change behavior. And too often, individuals are there because of poor decisions, and those poor decisions revolve around financial illiteracy. So, we operate in a number of women's prisons specifically, and these poor ladies, a lot of them ended up there because they were with a bad dude that was leading them in a bad spot, and they were financially dependent on bad people. So we go in and we help these individuals gain a sense of financial literacy, an idea of, hey, here's what you could do in your life. They don't have to go back to a place of crime and poor decisions if they have some resources. So let's help them out. And absolutely, we need to make sure that like alcohol and drug rehab is a part of that. But for the financial literacy piece, it's been so rewarding to see people who they didn't know what a credit score was, or they weren't banked and they didn't have an ability to borrow or even, know what to do with their paycheck. They didn't know how to budget. And now we're teaching them some principles. They're getting some practice. They're getting some excitement. And most importantly, they're getting some confidence. And these are going to be your neighbors. These people are going to be your kids are going to go to school with their kids. And the question is, what kind of neighbors do you want them to be? And when we're able to go in and give them some financial literacy, it's been so rewarding. I'll tell you about Dorothy. We love Dorothy. Dorothy was formerly incarcerated. She went through our financial literacy program while behind bars. When she got out, she was able to obtain employment and start budgeting. And she was able to save up and get an apartment. And because she was able to show her parole officer her financial stability, she was able to get her kids back. She regained custody of her kids right before Christmas, and she'd saved up enough money where she was able to purchase a few gifts for them and a Christmas tree. And she gets emotional where she talks about she never thought she'd be able to be the mom that provided Christmas to her kids. That is something that a lot of us take for granted. That's the kind of neighbor I want. I want Dorothy, who loves and cares for her kids and has them and is in a good situation. So we're seeing a lot of success in that space, and we're happy to do it.
That's great. Yeah. I mean, yeah, there's two ways to look at it, but it's important to be doing in some ways. So I can see, the pros and cons for sure. Well, Brennan, this has been awesome. I really appreciate you hopping on. Was there anything else I missed? Anything else you maybe wanted to bring up in our last few minutes here, or what lies ahead for you guys?
Yeah. So thanks for having me on. This is a great experience and love the work you're doing. And those that you partner with are lucky to have you guys who care so much to be involved. The state of financial literacy, the state of the union is changing rapidly. Legislatures politically, they're rapidly seeing that we should have done this decades ago and made these classes requirements. It's the most important thing these kids can learn when they come out of high school is basic financial literacy. And so we think the best way to teach it is through experiential learning. You learn how to ride the bike by sitting in the seat. And so we're putting these kids in these metaphorical bikes and letting them ride. And we're excited to see a more financially literate population. If you have partners out there that are saying, wow, this is interesting, we want to get involved, reach out. We've got a lot of schools that still need sponsors, and we can get you in front of teachers and students.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Brennan. And if they wanted to reach out, Brennan, I believe they could contact you at brennan.summers@stukent.com. So if anyone had interest, just wanted to share that. That's all we had today for Bank Talk. Again, Brennan, thank you so much for your time. We look forward to talking to you in the future. And everybody else out there, thank you for listening. Keep on learning. Have a great day. That's it for Bank Talk.
Thank you for joining us on the Bank Talk podcast brought to you by Remedy Consulting. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please rate, review, and share our work with others. To stay up to date with future episodes, Be sure to follow the show and turn on notifications. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.